Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Liza. She's our rock star. She created all of this, and so please give her a round of applause. She's done a terrific job. And to all of you who are with us, welcome to the White House. I never get tired of saying that. It's just thrilling to have you here. So today we honor 12 extraordinary champions of change for their work to promote the success of working parents and families around our country. You'll have a chance to meet them and hear from them in a moment. And these are folks who've been the catalyst for change in workplaces across America. They've helped advance policies that are good for both business and for families. From raising the minimum wage, to equal pay for equal work, to paid leave and paid sick time, to workplace flexibility, to providing affordable, quality child care, and much, much more. We're here to celebrate your success and to put a spotlight on work so that others will follow your extraordinary lead. So let's begin with giving a round of applause to our Champs for Change. So last June, we held the first ever White House Summit on Working Families, right here in Washington. We brought together business leaders and labor leaders and workers and academics and the media and a wide range of advocates and stakeholders from across our great country, discussing the critical issues that face the 21st century working family and the 21st century business. The evidence was clear that in order for U.S. companies, big and small, to be globally competitive, they have to recognize the values and address the needs of the 21st century working family. So what's changed? And what challenges and opportunities must we embrace? So, already we have seen a wave of new momentum and commitment from champions across the country. We know that, for example, that our workforce has evolved dramatically over the last few decades. Nearly half of our workforce is comprised of women. Today, in more than 6 out of 10 households with children, every adult works. In 1970, it was only 4 in 10. 40% of working women are the sole or primary breadwinner in their families. Child care costs have increased 72% in the last 25 years. And women still only earn 78 cents on the dollar when compared to men, and for women of color, much less. Among second earners, women are 17% more likely to eventually leave the workplace compared to men. And in fact, this is an interesting survey, of both men and women, all parents say that they have turned down a job because of inadequate work-life balance. Also today, 43 million Americans in the private sector do not have a single day of paid sick time. Not one day. And I can tell you, as a working single mom, I can't imagine what I would have done if I had not had paid sick time. I've never worked for an employer that didn't have it, but far, far too many Americans do. That means that if a working parent or one of their children is sick, they're likely to have to make the impossible choice between protecting their paycheck and job security and caring for themselves or for those they love. More and more businesses are initiating new efforts to respond to the changing demographics in our workforce. For example, recently, Microsoft announced that it's taking steps to require all of its suppliers that are in companies of greater than 50 employees to offer their workers at least 15 days paid leave per year. That's pretty terrific. You can clap for Microsoft. Their CEO, Satya Nadella, is one of our champions, and you'll be hearing from him later in our program when he introduces President Obama. Microsoft's actions and the actions being taken by businesses large and small around our country represent a growing recognition that employers understand that common sense leave policies not only make workers and their families healthier, which is no small accomplishment, but they also increase the productivity and loyalty and retention of employees. 2 weeks ago, Secretary Tom Perez, Tina Chin, and I launched our Lead on Leave tour around the country. Our goal is to highlight best practices and ways that paid sick leave and paid leave, and other workplace flexibility policies provide the needed boost to business, and that working families are depending upon so desperately. Last week, I visited my hometown of Chicago, and I was joined by Mayor Rahm Emanuel, who announced that the city of Chicago will establish a working families task force to address paid sick leave for workers, provide protections to shift workers and pregnant employees, and expand access to paid leave for new parents. And next week, I head to Philadelphia, where Mayor Nutter, under his leadership, the city council and local groups enacted an ordinance that requires companies with 10 or more workers to provide paid sick leave to their employees. Employees will accrue 1 hour per 40 hours they work. We need this kind of leadership on these issues from elected officials, and it's critical around the country, which is why Tom and Tina and I are often running. But as you champions know, you don't need to be a mayor to make real difference. You'll hear a whole lot more from our incredible leaders today, but I just want to take a moment to recognize each of our champions and introduce them to you, and we're so thrilled that they're here today. Our first one. She co-founded Working Matters, a coalition in Maryland, and she's pushing for paid sick day there. Please welcome Melissa Broom. Melissa, please stand. Next, the outstanding CEO of Patagonia, a company that's been leading on working family issues for years. Rose Macario, please stand and be recognized. Next, from SEIU, 1199 in New York, someone who has worked to secure paid sick days for all workers in New York. Cora Meredith, please stand. This is so much fun. The executive director of Family Forward Oregon, who has been working hard to pass paid sick days statewide, Andrea Peluso, please stand. A founder of the Labor Project for Working Families, who pushed for the nation's first statewide family leave law in California, Ned Steve Firestein, please stand. The executive director of the North Dakota Women's Network, who recently led efforts to ensure that North Dakota legislature passed a bill requiring reasonable accommodations for pregnant workers. Renee Strom, please. The owner of Places and Spaces for Growth Learning Center in Philadelphia, who helped to get paid sick day law there recently passed, Fatima Hassan, please stand. A woman who took over her family's small business and soon realized that they hadn't been paying men equally to women. And guess what she did? She changed it. Rashonda Young, please stand. Now, Analeha Mahahi is the executive director of the New Jersey Working Families Alliance, a nonpartisan organization that seeks to promote and defend the interests of New Jersey working families. She fought for New Jersey's workers to be able to earn paid sick leave days so that they can take time off when they're ill. And with her help, the Alliance has successfully advocated for local ordinances in 10 municipalities. Thousands of New Jersey workers have benefited from their work, and they now have access to paid sick days. Please stand. Randy George founded the Red Hen Baking Company in Duxbury, Vermont with his wife Elsa, and is one of our champions. Now, Red Hen, which employs 42 people, is mostly known for its delicious breads. But Randy and Elsa also deserve recognition for their support of policies that help working families. They have been outspoken supporters of paid sick day legislation, which many in their home state of Vermont are working hard to get passed this year, and increasing the minimum wage. They have practiced what they preach. Their employees enjoy these and other important benefits such as health care coverage and dedicated lactation room. Randy and Elsa, please stand. Randy, stand. When David Deary found out that his son Caleb was stricken with a rare brain malformation, not only was he devastated, but he also had his other children and their financial security to think about. Though there is nothing that could prepare him for the eventual heart-wrenching loss of Caleb, Rhode Island's temporary caregiving insurance law allowed David and his wife Nicole to receive wage replacement benefits when they took care of Caleb during their time off, especially in their final weeks with him when he needed a great deal of medical attention. Since then, David has become a powerful advocate for family leave in Rhode Island and across the country. And I want to thank him for lending his courage and incredibly important voice to this effort. David, please stand. All of our champions are providing around the country policies that are not just about what's doing right for our families, but what's right and what's smart for business and for our economy. We need more champions across the country to follow the lead of those who are being honored here today and the countless more who right now are leading by example. Together with growing flexibility and strengthening of our businesses, the commitment of the best workforce in the world, and the leadership of folks like today's champions, we are poised to lead in the global economy for years to come. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to say congratulations one more time to our champions of change. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to a tireless advocate for the American worker and their families. There is no one with more energy and dedication to ensure that all of our workers can thrive in our country and help our companies compete each and every day. Please join me in welcoming our Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Valerie. Good afternoon. It's great to see you all. I feel like I'm among a group of what John Lewis would call serial activists. You know, when he was talking to his folks 50 years ago, his parents were asking him, "What you gonna cause trouble?" And he said, "No, Mom, I'm gonna cause good trouble." And he proceeded to cause a lot of good trouble that made us a better nation. Valerie is a champion for change in her own right, and I will go into a foxhole with her any day of the week because she has been a leader, whether it's home care workers, whether it's the minimum wage, whether it's paid leave, a whole array of issues relating to basic middle-class economics and middle-class security. I've had the privilege of working so closely with her, learning from her and partnering with her. And so I want to thank her, and I want to thank this president, because you know what y'all are doing here? We're building a movement. That is plain and simple. I had a chance to sit with some of you over a little while ago, and I said to you, you know, 50 years ago, and the president just gave a remarkable speech down in Selma. You know, Selma was not only about John Lewis, who was a remarkable leader, and Dr. King, but it was about so many other people, some of whom gave their life for a cause. And it was, as so many people have said, it was about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And I am looking in this room, not only our 12 champions of change, but everyone in this room, ordinary people doing extraordinary things on behalf of working people, whether it's the minimum wage, whether it's paid leave, whether it's making sure that folks just have a fair shake. That's what our president does day in and day out. He makes sure that everyone just has a fair shake. And that's why I love my job, because I get to work for a boss who wakes up every day asking himself the question, what can we do to move the ball forward for working people? And it starts with listening. And when we go out there on the road, whether it's Valerie or Tina or myself, or recently as yesterday in Charlotte, the president, talking and listening to folks. The dinner table conversation is, how do we make ends meet? You know, the dinner table conversation or the bedtime conversation after the kids are down is, you know, Johnny's sick, who's going to stay with him tomorrow? And those choices, those unconscionable choices between the job that you need and the family that you love. And those are choices that we shouldn't have to make. Those are choices that every other industrialized nation in the world has dealt with so that those families don't have to make those choices. One of the most remarkable moments I've had in my job was when I traveled to Germany. I met with the Chamber of Commerce there, met with business leaders, one person of whom was from Ohio. And he and his wife were about to have their second kid. He said, my parents want me to move home so that they can see their grandchildren. And I said, no way I'm moving home, because you know what? Between my wife and I, we're going to spend the next year home with our newborn. And we can't do that back in Ohio. We can't do that back in the United States. And that's why we're staying here. So we're leaving talent on the table in so many ways, shapes, and forms. And so that's why we've got to start this movement. And we have started this movement. And I will tell you, one thing is clear to Tina, to Valerie, to the president and I, as we travel around talking about paid leave. The issue of paid leave is a when question. It is not an if question. And it's a when question because of all of you. It's a when question because so many of you have been doing heroic things. You know, in Maryland, Melissa has been leading the charge for paid sick days. And I had the privilege of working with an organization that she's very involved with, the Jobs Opportunity Task Force, when I was the labor secretary in Maryland. They got game. They do great work. And Melissa has been a great voice for working families. You know, on the other side of the country, you know, Andrea has been fighting the same fight in Oregon. You know, her Family Forward Oregon is behind the push for a host of policies that support working families and women. And I know they're going to get across the finish line as well because they're building a remarkable coalition. I know Valerie will soon be with Mayor Nutter, and I applaud his leadership. And Fatima was a big part of the paid leave movement. And she has demonstrated that, you know what, we don't have to live in a shareholder economy. We should live in a stakeholder economy. We don't make false choices between taking care of our bottom line, taking care of our workers, or taking care of our customers. People like Rose, people like Fatima have demonstrated that we can do all three, and we can do them darn well. You know, Cora Manita, 1199 SEIU, you know that Mary Kay Henry, she's got real game, okay? We know that, you know, and she's not just up in New York. You know, you're working in New York, you're working up and down the East Coast. I was with Mary Kay in Los Angeles recently, and she's working for fair wages, working for home care workers, working for dignity for all working families. And you know, these concepts just ain't radical. This is who we are as a nation. And when I travel the world, I realize as well, these are not just, you know, ideas for Berkeley, California, or Tacoma Park, Maryland. Because when you look around the world, and I've been recently to Australia, I've been to Canada, I've been to UK, I've been to Germany. All of those countries are ruled by center-right governments. And all of those countries embrace paid leave. And in fact, the government of Australia, the ruling party, the conservative ruling party, they ran on a platform of expanding paid leave. That was how they won the election, the ruling conservative party. So when you go to your state and local governments, or you go to your members of Congress, and you tell them that paid leave is a when question, and the when is now, and they tell you, oh, that's just some, you know, idea out of the Center for American Progress, you say, no, it ain't. It is an idea, and by the way, if it were, it'd be a damn good idea, because they have a lot of good ideas at the Center for American Progress. And I used to be on the board there. But you tell them that this is not a progressive idea. It's not a Republican idea. It's not a red state, blue state thing. Around the world, it's recognized as imperative to surviving in a global economy, taking care of working families. And so many businesses, as Valerie correctly pointed out, have already done this. And they've figured it out. Microsoft didn't do this in a whim. They did it after looking at the evidence and showing the business case. Rose has demonstrated the business case that the high road is the smart road. And when you take care of your workers, you reduce turnover. And the costs of turnover are enormous. And we've seen it in the United States and Canada. I'm always marveling when I look at labor force participation of women. Back in 2000, the labor force participation of women in Canada and the US was identical. Now Canada is about 7.5% higher. That translates to, if we had simply kept pace, we would have 5.5 million more women in the workplace here in America. 5.5 million more women contributing to the Social Security Trust Fund, Medicare. 5.5 million more women giving talent across this country. America works best when we feel the full team. And we need to get away from the Leave It a Beaver world of yesteryear, and we need to have policies that reflect the modern family world of today. And so that's why I know, every day I look and I say, and today there's 647 days for me till the weekend. Okay? That's January 20th, 2017. The weekend. And every single day between now and then, Tina and Valerie and I and the president and everyone else is going to be out there leading on leave, because it is a when question. And we see state and local governments leading the way on leave. And when they do that, they create that momentum. And that is why we are having a Margaret Mead moment in this room. Because you know what? We should never doubt the power of a few people. And you know what? It's not just a few people anymore. It's a few million people around this country as a result of your advocacy. You are at the center of a movement. And so when you're in Oregon, or you're in North Dakota, or you're in Rhode Island, or you're in anywhere you are, and someone asks you, what are you doing on this? You're not just helping your community. You're part of a bigger movement. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things to build an America that works for everyone. An America where families don't have to make choices between the family they love and the job that they need. Mothers and fathers can make choices about whether to have another kid without having to worry about whether they have to rack up their credit card bill to simply fund maternity leave or paternity leave. That's not who we are as a nation. We have to feel the full team. It is part of our global competitiveness. It's the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. Thank you for helping us lead the movement. Thank you to my colleagues, Latifah and others at the Women's Bureau, the Department of Labor. They're doing very well. I was going to say it in a different way. Thank you to my friends at the White House. I mean, without Valerie and Tina, we would not be where we are today. They are helping to lead this movement. And most importantly, without this president, he understands, growing up in a single family household, he understands these challenges. These are not abstract concepts to the president. They are about his DNA. And his DNA is all about an America that works for everyone. And so I can't wait to keep on the road, because I was in Seattle, I get fired up when I'm there. I'm in all these other cities, I get fired up when I meet y'all in the work that you're doing. And I have no doubt in my mind that this is indeed a when question. I have no doubt, because you're doing such great work. So let's keep leading on leave, and let's keep on keeping on, and let's keep on, in the words of John Lewis, let's keep on causing some good trouble. Thank you so much.
I would now like to invite Roy Austin, Deputy Assistant to the President in the Office of Urban Affairs, Justice, and Opportunity, and our first panel of champions to the stage.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roy Austin, and I'm with the Domestic Policy Council. And I probably should have warned our panelists beforehand how I was going to run this, but we haven't had a chance to do that. So we're going to try something here. I'm a real big fan of something that Megan Smith, who recently joined the White House, does, and she does everything lightning. speed. Everything she does. She walks with lightning speed, she talks with lightning speed, comes up with ideas with lightning speed. So what I'm going to ask is that you keep your answers to about 1 minute each. We only have about 35 minutes here. So I'm going to throw out a bunch of questions, and you guys are just going to fire, and this is all about you. So first of all, personally, why is it that you believe that these family-friendly policies are important? What is it about your life story that makes these important to you? So, Anna Lilia, let me start with you. Sorry.
So, I think I draw from two places. One, I grew up in a family that was a working class, working poor family. My mother's actually here. I saw her make choices between making ends meet and just being able to care for me and my sister. And the second piece, and I know I'm not being lightning, is my 3-year-old, who I want to create a better future and a better America to ensure that when he grows up, he's able to have fairer policies.
Renee?
Well, mostly I believe in equality, and I think that the person who provides the work, does the work on the ground, also deserves the benefits that people on the top also get. They should have the breaks that they need. They should have the pay that they deserve. And also, I was raised in a very tiny, tiny town. There was 200 people in my town, 14 in my class. So the idea of close community bonds was a big driver of that. And I think that that sense of community and that family brings in this idea that balance should be in people's lives, so they can not only just work, but also work and engage with those that they know and love.
Nesty?
I would say my kind of aha moment came almost 30 years ago. I was working at a labor union, and I had a baby, and I got fully paid maternity leave, which I had no idea how lucky I was. But then I came back to work, and I had to figure out childcare. I had to figure out how I was going to get to the childcare center at 6 o'clock at the end of the day, what I was going to do when the child got sick. And I saw other union members who were struggling with this, and I sort of say I made the personal political, and felt like that was what I had to work on.
David?
Well, my family was thrown into this. Our involvement is very direct. My second son, who was born a few years ago, was born with a significant disability. So at that time, of course, I had no political influence. I had no involvement. But of course, in order to make a change, I think, in order to need a change, you have to make a change. And we got involved really kind of on the front lines, needing that change and needing the assistance of a number of resources. And of course, the one that we were working with was family leave, which was incredibly important for us. Our son was profoundly disabled and unfortunately in the hospital multiple times throughout his life. And even most recently, just the bill passed just under 2 years ago now, and he just recently passed. But it influenced us in a dramatic way. For us to be home and to not have to make that decision where you have to choose, which is what we're saying is so true, choose between family and choose between work. To take that out of the element of caring for your family is enormous, and that couldn't have affected us more directly.
And thank you, David, for being here, and we really appreciate that you're continuing this fight. Melissa?
So there are two things. One's personal, one's professional. On a personal level, I am a working mom. I have three kids at home, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 10-month-old. And I can't tell you how many times each year one of them gets sick. And my husband and I look at each other and say, who's going to stay home today? But the beauty, the thing that we're grateful for in our family is that we can do that. And being home with them and being where we're supposed to be doesn't mean that we're not going to be able to make ends meet that month. On a professional level, I am just so driven by the tremendous number of advocates in Maryland and throughout the country, but especially in Maryland, who have poured their heart and souls into our campaign. One of the moms, Megan, who's here with us today, who testified this year before our state legislature about what it's like to be a single mom of 3 who doesn't have paid sick days. This is something that we all need to survive and function, and we got to get it done.
Rashad?
Well, my story comes from working with my dad's business and realizing that women were not being paid equal to men. And a big part of it is awareness You know, you hear that there's a pay inequality, but when you can see it, when you see the numbers and when they're drastic numbers, that's where there's time where you can make a change because you actually know that it's going on. And fortunately, I was in a position to make a change. And, you know, I thought whether I may lose my job for doing this because I was not authorized to make the change, but at least, at least if I have to leave, they've got more money in their pockets because he's not going to take the pay raise away. So, you know, the big thing is that people need to know. They need to know that they're being discriminated against and they need to be able to do something about it.
So Secretary Perez mentioned Tacoma Park, and that's where I'm from, and it happens to be a place that believes in everything. Okay, so, but Rashonda, starting with you, make the business case for why these policies make sense.
Pay equity makes sense, minimum wage, increasing the minimum wage makes sense, paid sick leave, all those things make sense for many reasons, but one that I've seen in our business is because it increases your retention. As you show your people that you care about them, they're not just, you know, people walking in and out, bringing in money for the company, but they're people who actually matter to you. They know that they matter to you because you put policies in place to take care of them. You allow them to have time off when they need it. And so we have better retention. We have you know, a lot less turnover than what we had before we start implementing some of these policies.
Melissa?
One of our biggest partners in Maryland, she's here today too, I don't know where, Amanda from Charmington's, when the president visited Charmington's Cafe in January, you know, I know Amanda shared with him how she offers paid sick days and so many other of these benefits because it's good for her bottom line. And because, you know, when you take care of your employees, they take care of you and are loyal to you. We see that time and time again. I know that the United States Women's Chamber of Commerce has been a big supporter of paid sick days. That's because it's smart.
David?
I think job satisfaction rate is one of the most important things. We spend more time at work than anywhere else. But to know that you can actually focus your attention on family or other places when you need to more than other times, then that gives you that job satisfaction. To know that you have this, I go to work all the time and I say that, to know that I have that support, that I have that network that's going to back me, so that way I can be with my family or with my sick kids when it's necessary. I think it's critical. I think it's critical to be able to have that, to be able to maintain that.
That's
So I'm from Berkeley, California, which is the other place that he mentioned.
right. That's right.
But I think there's lots of research in all kinds of ways about why this is good for business in terms of paid family leave. We've had it in California for 10 years. There's a really good study that was done on business looking at it. And basically, businesses either said, no big deal, or it helped in terms of morale and retention, all the things that people have been saying. And the other thing is, you know, things happen to families. Workers have families and they have babies and they get sick and they need childcare, and people are figuring it out. So it's not as if we're kind of making this up as we go along. You know, these policies really are good for workers as well as for business.
Renee?
Well, the policy we're here for is because of reasonable accommodations for pregnant women at work. And it's good for business to provide some temporary relief along the way, because that retention issue is so valuable to keep your strong and good employees. And in North Dakota, our job market is such that actually they're desperate for employees, so they should be very open to looking at ways that they can retain the employees. And I think these policies are a big piece of it.
So I think all of these policies are incredibly important because they help working families like retain just fairness and equity and sustain themselves. And we know that our economy is actually driven by the ground and by the center up. And so if you have people who could take their kid to a movie or make ends meet or buy groceries and not have to worry because they're pregnant or they're not getting fair pay or they got sick, right? Or, you know, they had to stay home to care for their parent who is terminally ill. I mean, this is good for our economy, bottom line. So it's good for us, it's good for the economy, it's good for employers.
So you've talked about the personal impact, you've talked about the business impact. I think Valerie and Tom may be going on a road show soon, okay? And they need the narrative. Talk about someone outside of you, outside of the general business sense, that personal story of how this has changed someone's life or how it has impacted someone. Nancy, let's start with you on this one.
Well, you know, there are so many stories, but one that always kind of moves me is somebody that I've worked with for a long time. I'll call her Mary. She had a baby. She had a first baby. She took paid family leave. She had a second baby. She took paid family leave. But then I ran into her, and the new baby was born with some issues, some deformities with his legs, and he was going to have an operation when he was 1 or 2. And I said, well, Mary, you took paid family leave. Do you know that you could also take paid family leave because you can use it for a sick child or parent, et cetera? And so she started to cry, and every time she tells a story, she starts to cry, because what she didn't realize is then she could also take the time off when her son had to go into the hospital for this surgery.
Renee?
Well, the policy that we worked on, I think about the women that I worked in to come tell their stories of why they need the accommodations, and it was specifically Lindsay, who had a job that required shift work, and her doctor really was trying to get her to adjust that with her employers, and they weren't working with her on that. And so instead of reaching out to all the other employees, which is what would have probably been the best solution for the supervisor, and seeing how they would trade and share that time so she could have a day shift. Instead, she lost her job and hasn't really been able to find anything since. But testifying, somebody offered her a job from the from viewing, so we should have a good outcome in the long run. The bill just passed, just got signed, so we'll see hopefully the outcome down the road.
And Olivia?
So on Monday, we had some food service workers, lunch ladies, testify about the need for earned sick time, and they pointed to not only how important it was to them to not serve a side of flu with French fries, but also because they saw children that were being sent to school ill because the parents couldn't stay home with them, and they just had to make a go at it and just send them and hope that the nurse doesn't catch it. And so these workers are not only looking out for themselves, for their families, but they're also caring for young children whose parents are struggling with the same reality. So.
David?
Well, it's hard to really share a story outside of my own, really, since the impact that I've had is my largest. But I actually am a physician assistant. I work in Madison doing biopsies, and I see patients every day on the front line of cancer diagnoses, every single day. And I mean, when you're in that situation, you're always with your family, and it blows my mind now, even having 2 years into this bill that's been passed, people still don't know about this. They're there with their family, and literally on a daily basis, families wait for the patient to go in for their procedure, and then they leave because they have to go to work. It's unbelievable how it's just a lack of realization, really, that what is out there. But every day, these families could benefit from it. I think the biggest, though, really, and I have to talk about my own again, simply because we were impacted so profoundly by it, was, and even most recently, we were fortunate enough that we didn't need to use the TCI so often in the earlier phases as it was being developed. We were playing a role in getting it passed, but then right after it got passed is when my son was very, very sick, terminally sick, and passed away. And even though it's not on, you don't want it to be on your mind, financial stresses are still on your mind. They are. It's unbelievable how much of an impact financial stresses have in your family relationship, even at that time. But to be able to put that aside, to be able to be home in those last few weeks, I can't even describe the impact that it has. For my wife and I, it was just monumental. It was absolutely enormous.
Melissa?
Similar to, or playing again on that people in the medical profession, we had a nurse testify, and I should say in Maryland we have not yet succeeded in passing paid sick days, but we're going to get there. This year we had a nurse testify at our hearings about how she works all day with people who are often, they wind up being diagnosed with pretty serious diseases, and she talked about a man who had just found out that he had been diagnosed, I think it was with a type of cancer, and he needed to have a procedure. It was important for him to have the procedure, and he looked at her and said, I can't do this. I can't schedule this. I have to get back to work. I can't lose my job. And you think about people who really are, in these incredibly difficult, low moments in their lives, whether it's for themselves or for their child or for their own parent, and these practical decisions they have to make because doing what's right for them and their health is going to hurt their ability to survive. That's what stands out to me.
And Rashad.
The issue that stands out to me, and this is along the lines of pay equity, as part of giving our workers a raise, one of the women who got a raise was one of my best friends who works with us. And by having more money in her pocket, she was able to put together a plan to pay down her debt. And she'd never owned a home before, a single female, and she was able to then, purchase a home. Now it's been 2 years ago, but without getting that pay raise and being able to have the money that she actually deserved, she still probably would be in the debt that she was in, and she'd still probably be renting a home.
Now, you all clearly do not work for the federal government because you followed instructions and you're firing through this thing, and this is very different than I'm used to. So, so I'm going to ask you. So let me challenge you a little bit. Take the argument that you've heard against these family-friendly policies. Explain that argument and push back against it, and say why that is absolutely wrong. Melissa, I'm going to start with you.
There are so many arguments that we hear. I guess one that immediately comes to mind is that we'll hear employers say when they speak to us and speak to our legislators that we can do this on our own. We don't need, we already do this. We don't need government to tell us what to do. We've got this. We know what is best for our business. And but we know that across the country, 40% of workers don't have paid sick days, and in Maryland, it's more than 700,000. So we know that the status quo is not working, and we also know that we do need government to step in, right? Without government, we wouldn't have child labor laws, we wouldn't have a minimum wage, we wouldn't have OSHA. There are so many things. There's a place where, and a time where we need government to help us do the right thing. So that's one of my favorites, I guess.
Rashad.
So for minimum wage is another issue that I really have been fighting for, an increase in the minimum wage. And I've had business owners say that it's going to really, hurt your business to have to pay your people above minimum wage. Well, I've never paid people minimum wage. It's always been above minimum wage. The argument that I have to fight back against it is every day we have, I won't say every day, a lot of days we have people coming in and they are the working poor and they ask, do you guys accept food stamps? We get that question all the time, do you accept food stamps? Unfortunately, we can't accept food stamps, but if these people have more money in their pocket, I know some of the jobs that they work at, and they are the working poor, minimum wage jobs, we would have more customers in our business who are able to afford our product since we can't accept food stamps.
Renee?
So the biggest argument I've heard, I would just say even this year to the greatest extent, is that discrimination no longer exists. And so this is not a problem, and your policy won't solve it because it's not the problem. So what I think is the most relevant piece of discussion is data and stories. And you show up with a few people's testimony, individuals who have gone through it, the experience. There's no real refuting a personal story. And we really have to have great research to back it up. And those are the biggest tools that we bring forth to those arguments. And it's a really ridiculous one, but it's so common.
And a little
So, all of the pushback essentially boils down to, if you do that, the sky will fall down and the economy will crash and people will be rioting in the streets. And we just point to place after place after place where it's been successful. We could make a rational argument, point to facts, point to reality, but for some, we can't convince them. We just turn to people power, because the reality is that any opponent, when faced with a multitude of people who say, you know what, we call the question on your position, we actually think that this is the right thing to do, we demand that you make change, and half the time, if they don't fold to the argument and reason, they fold to people power, so.
David?
I think that, the obvious one that we hear all the time with Paid Family Leave Act is just the cost effectiveness of it, which seems crazy to me, but people do still say all the time, well, I don't want to pay for somebody else's time out of work. I don't want to pay for your time that you may need. But the obvious and the easy argument against that is I think, is lack of understanding, because the cost is so minimal, right? I mean, for this minimal cost, we're basically providing this amazing blanket of security. But the other thing is that people just lack the understanding of when you may need it, right? So just this lack of really realization that you could benefit from this, you may need this, is very common. But the ridiculous cost argument is very common. I hear this all the time.
Nancy?
Well, the one I loved the best was these billboards that said, if we pass pay family leave, all the businesses in California will move to Nevada. Well, you know what? That hasn't happened. And the other thing, adding to what David said, is it works as a giant insurance fund. So it allows small businesses who often really can't afford to pay their workers 6 weeks of paid family leave to be able to say, yes, go ahead and take the leave, you can have your job back, and basically you apply for it and get it through the state insurance fund, which workers pay into and is so incredibly cheap. I don't know if this happens in Rhode Island or California. Most people don't even realize what that line on your payroll tax is because it's so small.
So we have a bunch of serial activists out here who need a charge, need to know what it is that they can do to be most effective to push these ideas and these policies. Give them that charge. What is it that you would say to them? Let's start with Renee.
I think, without a doubt, the biggest support and the way you do it is in coalitions, that you have to join together, because people power makes all the difference. Individually, it's a much bigger lift. I mean, it's not like it's impossible, but find your allies, find unusual partners, business and organizations and legislative leaders, whoever it might be, and come together on it and do some planning and come up with some actions that you can take forth, little ones and then big ones.
David?
Well, I think that what's important to realize is that every voice matters, and I mean, we saw that so clearly. I've always felt that we played such a tiny little role in passing or supporting this bill, but it's important to get to your state house and speak to your legislators. Local level is critically important. We were talking about this at lunch earlier too, but I think it's incredibly important to be there at your local and get the people that are impacted and affected by it and bring them there. Those voices make an enormous difference. That realization that this is actually making a difference in people's lives. I think that the state, these local legislation don't see that sometimes, and to see it on a personal level makes an enormous impact.
Anna Lilia.
So I don't want to scare you with the advice that I'm going to give. But I'm like, I treat it like it's guerrilla warfare. So you have to come at it in as many ways as possible. We got stuck at the state level trying to push an earned sick day leave, and so we took it to local voters and started moving it at the municipal level. Then we started getting questions that, oh, well, you're only doing this in like politically viable places. Real people don't care about this. So then we put it on the ballot, and won by like 75 and 86% in the two places we put it. And that's what we're going to keep doing. It's like, don't let them see you coming. Keep figuring out different ways, because it really is, when we're fighting against essentially machines, corporations, like, forgive, present company excluded. People who are focused on the bottom line first instead of regular people. We're little Davids fighting with rocks and sticks, and we have to just give it our all and do anything we can.
I am afraid of you. Rashonda.
I agree with what everyone has said, but I know for me, it's big to push your legislators, whether it be on your county, municipal level, but also on the state level. And then, of course, when it comes to the federal level, calling and bugging them. Don't be afraid to bug them. They work for you, and you do have to remember that.
And I'm confusing myself now, so I think Nancy has not spoken.
Yeah, I would say, be big, be bold. When we proposed this law, people said it's not the right time, the economy isn't good, we should do it, but not now, you're crazy, why are you thinking of this? And we passed the bill in 1 year, which really was a surprise to us, because sometimes you don't know. The timing changes, you have a little bit of luck mixed in, you have good organizing, you have key champions, and sometimes it comes together, and, we're persistent, and we'll continue to do that.
Melissa?
I think the importance of coalition can't be underscored. In Maryland, we have a coalition that we started 3 years ago, the Working Matters Coalition. It now has over 130 members from throughout our state. And I think it's not just having the coalition, but having ways for them to play a role. These aren't just people who signed their name onto a coalition. They host their own events. They come to our state capitol. They walk the halls. They bring their kids to meet with legislators. They are the reason that we had almost 100 co-sponsors on our bill this year. It's because these issues are so controversial and so driven oftentimes by corporate interests that without the voice from the ground, without the people, the voters in their legislators' faces, we're not gonna make change. So I think coalition all the way.
And don't worry about the noise. A few of my friends just came. Out here. So,
Can I also say they can run for office too, these serial activists.
okay. So this is about you guys, and you guys are all absolutely amazing. What you've done, what you continue to do. I am honored to have this opportunity to have this conversation with each of you. Let me give the floor to you at the end to say whatever final piece you want to make sure people know about your fight for family-friendly workplaces. And so we'll start with Rashonda and move right down the line.
So for my final 1 minute, I'll say, it's not just an issue for your local communities. It's not just an issue for business. It really is an issue that affects all of our economy. It affects everyday people. It affects everybody's lives in some way or another when people are not paid fairly. It affects everybody's life in some way or another when people can't take time off when they're sick, when you're getting poverty wages, yet you're working every single day. It affects everybody's lives. And so, as long as there is inequality, there has to be the fight. And, we've got to not be afraid, get out there, and we've got to just do it. So.
I just want to use my last minute to thank you. And all of you all are here because you are activists. And look where you are today. Look what is about to happen. All the people who just came into this room because of the person who's going to be speaking in a few minutes.
No, they're here for me.
Sorry, Roy.
So you know.
No, this is incredible. This is a day. This is a moment, really, for the issues that we are all working on every day around this country to make people's lives better. People who are just wanting to get up every day and go to work and support their families without having to make these choices. And you all did this. You brought us here. You're bringing attention to this issue in a way that it's never been attended to before. And really, on behalf of all of us, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And I was going to say the same thing. Everyone here is really like-minded, so we're all coming from the same standpoint. So, and I agree that we need to keep moving forward. I think that what we're doing is incredible. Where we've come is amazing. And clearly, from a personal level, I can't thank everyone enough. I can't thank where we've come enough. The whole idea of all of these different laws that we're talking about is about supporting each other, right? I mean, it's about giving a little bit so that way we can all be better in the long run. I don't understand why we don't all get that, right? It seems so simple, but we need to keep moving forward. I think it's amazing what's going on.
I want to just try to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, because we're each doing different issues, and it's so important to tie it all together. So while it's paid family leave, it's also the need for high-quality and affordable childcare, which so many of us deal with. It's equal pay for equal work, and a couple of days ago was Equal Pay Day, and we're not going to wait till, 2058 to get equal pay for women. It's the higher minimum wage, should I say that, and flexible work hours and paid sick days. So we need to sort of put all together the pieces of this puzzle.
Well, I would say that, without a doubt, there's so much to be said for perseverance. And in North Dakota, that was not, these wins are not easy. They don't come quickly. We really took a lot of fighting back against our foes, and we had some really major wins on the ballot this last November. And it allowed this opportunity to suddenly get to talk about women in a whole way. And that allowed some immense success, and that's why beat them, stay at it, and you can win for all families.
I just want to echo gratitude. I actually came into today, this week, having lost one of our earned sick day votes, and feeling kind of deflated over it. And I feel really grateful for the work that my brothers and sisters are doing, the fact that we have like the biggest house, the most powerful people, the most powerful man, including as you two, backing our efforts. It's giving me renewed energy. I started this work really focused on the fact that when I was growing up, I watched the struggle, and as a child, it hurt to not be able to help my mother and my father, and I feel so renewed to continue to fight this fight so that other children are not going to have to watch their parents cry over these decisions. So, thank you.
And one final round of applause for this absolutely amazing group of people.